Hello guys, welcome to this video. And in today's video we will be doing a very simple design just to get you familiar with Photoshop, right? So let's get started. So the first thing we would want to do is to create a Photoshop document, right? I am using Photoshop 2021, Photoshop Creative Cloud 2021, and you can always follow along with your own version of Photoshop. That's going to be no problem, right? So to create a new document, you click on File, click on New, and you'd have this window which would pop up. And now let's input the name of our file, right? The name of our file. So I'll call this first design. And the second thing is we need to input the dimensions of our file, right? So the first thing, let's change the unit of measurement from pixels to inches, right? And let's just make a square design, right? Something that's good for Instagram. So let the width be 10 and let the height be 10. Any square value is going to work fine. Like you can put a value of 8 by 8 or 7 by 7, is going to work fine. We just need to have a square. Makes sense, right? So we have 10 inches by 10 inches. And we can just allow the other options here and just click on create. So we have something like this, right? So Photoshop has created our document, and if you notice up here, you see the name of our file, first design, right? That makes sense. Okay, so for those who are pretty new to Photoshop, this environment might be a little bit overwhelming, right? And your environment may actually look different from mine, depending on your settings in Photoshop, and also depending on your version of Photoshop. But that's no problem. I'm going to walk you through everything, right? So let's just get ourselves familiar with the environment of Photoshop. So this first, you notice these menu items here, right? You have file, edit, image, layer, type, select, and so on, right? So all of these here, this is what we call the menu options, right? You can click on file, you go to edit, and so on, and you have so many options in there, right? So this is what's called the menu bar. Yeah, this is what is called the menu bar, right? Now the next thing, you notice this bar at the left hand side of your screen, this bar here. And if you look keenly, you notice that these are tools, right? So this is what's called a toolbar in Photoshop, where we have all of our tools. And if you hover any tool, you would see what that particular tool does, right? Like if I hover over this T here, you see the type tool, and it basically adds horizontal type, which is basically text, right? And so on. Now, when you select a particular tool, notice these options below here, right? Now, if I take the next tool, see as the options change, right? So the options here will change depending on the tool you're working with, right? So this option, this is what we call the tools options. If I select the next tool, this is the tools options here change, right? You see the tools options change, right? So these are menu options up here. We have the toolbar and we have our tools options here, right? Then to the right hand side we have some other options, right, which we are going to explore later on. Makes sense, right? And one very important one is this layers here. Very important. We'll see the use of this later on, right? So the first thing is, let's just go to window here, click on window, go to workspace, and let's just go to reset essentials, right? Okay, you see it has changed up something like this, right? You can also click here and you see have the same thing here, reset essentials, right? We have the same thing here, right? Now remember, this we resetted our just resetted the workspace, right? And in Photoshop you have the liberty to reset your workspace and put your items or your elements or your panels in any way you want, right? It's Photoshop. For example, you see this color here, right? I can just click and drag it out like that, right? I have the liberty to do that. You can just click on these layers down here and drag it out, and maybe even expand like this, right? It's Photoshop, it's my workspace, right? So I can decide how my workspace looks like, right? I don't know if that makes sense. So in Photoshop, you have the liberty to play around with your workspace and how it looks like, right? But for this video, let's just keep things very simple. I'll just go back and reset, click on window, go to workspace, and I just click on reset essential like so, and we have this. So the goal of this video is to get you familiar with Photoshop by just doing a very simple design, right? Okay, so first things first, let's just go back to our move tool, which is the first tool on the toolbar. Let's click on it. Okay, we have that. Now let's bring in an image from our file system, right? So let's just go to our file system, and here, so for me, I'm just going to bring in this particular image here. So I'll just drag and drop the image in here like that, right? And I'll click on this check mark here, right? So accept that, and we have that, right? So now let's scale this image up. Let's make it a little bit bigger. Now, how do we zoom in and zoom out, right? So we have our zoom tool here, right down here. You can click on that, and notice now we have the plus head, right? That positive head. You see this, the plus on that, on the zoom tool, right? If we come now to the tool options here, we can change it to the head which has the minus sign, right? Like this one here, like that. And if you just click on the screen, you're zooming out just by clicking, right? If you come back up here and select one with the positive sign, if you click, you're zooming in, right? I'm sure that makes sense. Or you can hold Alt on your keyboard. Notice the sign changes, and if you leave Alt, the sign changes back. Does that make sense? All right. Then another way to zoom out, you just hold Control on your keyboard and you press the minus sign. That's how you zoom out. If you still hold Control and press plus, you zoom in, right? Then if you hold Control and press 0 on the keyboard, let's say you've zoomed out to this level and you press Control and 0, it brings everything to scale, like to fit on the screen like that, right? Makes sense. All right, so let's zoom out a little. So I'll hold Control and minus on the keyboard. Okay, now we can use the move tool, this first one here, and we can move this guy around like so, right? Now let's scale this guy up to fill up this space. You notice there's some white space up here and down here, right? So how do we do that? We get the move tool and we just select this guy. Notice something. If you look down here, somewhere down here, you see the picture has been added here. This is a guy here, right? So if I click out of the screen, nothing is selected here. But if I click on this picture here, you notice the guy is now selected, right? So this is what's called a layer. We'll just look at that shortly. Now let's select this guy, right? And we should now do press control and T on your keyboard, right? Control and T. You now have something like this. We have these outlines which have come back. All right. So let's just click on one end and drag, right? If you're using Photoshop 2018 and later, right? When you click, when you're dragging like so, you should hold shift so that it scales it up proportionally. If you don't hold shift, you're going to have something very funny like this, right? You're going to distort him, right? So hold shift to make it scale proportionally like this. If you're using Photoshop 2020 and above, you don't need to hold shift, right? You just drag and it's going to scale him for you, right? So you just scale the guy and till he starts going out of the document. You see these sections here going out of the document, right? You have something like that, and let's just accept like that, and let's just now make him fit in the design. Let's just try to centralize him. You can also use your arrow keys, your up and down keys, to move him around like this. You can use your up keys, your down keys. You can use your left and right keys, arrow keys on the keyboard. And for me, I think something like this looks okay. This looks fine, right? So the next thing I would want to do, let me just zoom in back. I want to create a gradient map. Don't bother about the word, right? We'll look at this. I just want to introduce to Photoshop very quickly. So now let's come here, select the guy first. You see he's selected like this, right? Now let's come down here, and I'm sure you see this down here. So we'll click on this icon here, and we'll select gradient map, which is this, the second to the last item here. So we now have something like this, right? And just double click here on this little icon here, or double click on that, and we now have this stuff which has appeared here, properties. I think you should have properties here like this, right? So just now click on this color here, just click on it once. You should now have something, a window which pops up like this, right? Now we have, you notice these colors here, right? So the same colors we have from here to here. So if you double click on this first one, just down here, double click on it, you have another window which pops up like this, where you can now change the color here, right? So let me just drag this away so they can see that. If I now select, let's say I can't change the color to something like blue here, then I can now change the value of that blue, right? Let's I go with this very dark value of blue, and I take OK, right? And I can come and click here to change this value here. Let's say I want this a little bit like so, and I think okay, so I'm comfortable with this value, right? Then I click OK again here, and that's what we have, right? So um we have created a gradient map, right, above this guy. Remember, these are layers here, so we have created the gradient map adjustment layer above this guy, right? Another thing, we can toggle things on and off. Notice this eye here, right? I can, if I click on the eye, it hides that, right? I click on the eye, it brings it back. Same with the guy. If I click on this guy, this eye here, it hides out the layer of the guy, right? That makes sense, right? If that does not make much sense, don't bother. It's going to, everything's going to make sense with time, right? So let's keep on working. So we have this gradient map which we've added, right? So the next thing, we want to add some text to this design, right? So we select our type tool, which is this one here. You can press T on the keyboard, or you can just click on this tool here like that, right? And you now click here. So when you just click on the screen, you can start typing, right? So I'll type I choose. All right, so that's the first thing I'll type, I choose, right? Now notice the color is not too visible, right? The color of the text, right? So let's just select everything, and notice our tools options have changed here to something else, right? So let's change the color of this text, right? So you can come here and click on that, and let's change the color to white like that, right? Change the color to be white like that, and let's accept that, and let's select back our move tool like so, right? And we can now move this text around with the move tool. Remember, this move tool is meant to move text around, right? So let's move, we have this, and now let's copy this text here. So I want to write I choose strength, right? Now you notice I choose is on a layer on its own, right? And it's in all capital letters, right? So do that, and let's now copy this layer, right? So you can hold Alt on your keyboard, and you now notice that head which appears, right? That double head, we have black and white. So you can now click on this and drag down like this, right? And you allow, right? In case you're facing difficulty with that, you can just come back to your type tool here and just click on screen again and just type strength. I think this should work for everybody, right? And you accept here. So, and you go back to your move tool, which is, you can press V on the keyboard to get your move tool. So we have two things. We have I choose and we have strength, right? Notice this layer here, we have strength on a different layer, we have I choose on a different layer, right? I think you should have the same thing. So let's click on, now let's change the font sizes here, right? So let's go back to our type tool here. Let's select the first one, strength, select everything, and change the typeface to 90 like so. And let's select the typeface to Times New Roman, right? You might have something else. Let's take Times New Roman regular, right? Some of you call this font, no problem. For now, that's okay. Let's take Times New Roman, then here we should have regular, then here we should have 90, and the color should be white like that, right? And let's do the same, let's accept that, let's do the same thing. So let's just click on this I choose, just click here. Now notice something, when you want to edit text, right, you just click, you just point on that text and you click on it, right, and you can now edit like so, right? Now if you have this type tool and if you point outside, notice the box around that cursor. But if you come to an already existing text layer like so, right, and you click on it, it changes to something editable, right? That makes sense. So out here you have that box around it. Out here we don't have a box, which indicates that you can edit that, right? So this one, let's change the font size of this one to about 70 or so. Let's say 70, and let's say it looks like, all right, I think that looks okay. Or we can say 60. Yeah, that looks nice. And let's now click on this check mark to accept that here like that. So let's go back to our move tool. So we have I choose, right, strength like so. So the last thing we'll be doing in this video, let's just add some shapes to it, right? So let's just click outside here. Now when I click outside, notice no layer is selected here. If I click on strength, notice strength, the strength layer is selected here, right? So if I click on strength here, notice the strength layer is selected. If I click on choose, notice the layer is selected. So let's just click outside so that we have no layer selected like so. Now let's bring in, let's create a shape, right? Let's have a shape over here and over here, right? So let's go to our shape tool, which is this one here, right? So let's click here, or you can just press U on the keyboard. In case you don't have this rectangle, you can just right click on it and you select. You see you have so many tools. You select the first one, rectangle. So let's just draw a rectangle by clicking and dragging over here, like so. So that's the first one, right? And notice it's above our text. So let's come back to our layer system here and just make this bigger. So I've just put that outside, and let's bring this all the way down below strength and below I choose, right? So this is like a stack of plates where a layer is on top of another layer, right? So if you bring this rectangle up here, it's above that, right? And it covers that. So if you bring this below, it's going to be below that. So we have strength above that, right? So let's draw a shape for above I choose, like so. I choose like that. So we have something like that, right? And let's go back to our move tool as usual, right? So we have I choose strength, right? So now let's just make sure everything is properly centralized. Just click on your text and try to make that, do the adjustments and make sure everything is properly adjusted like that. And yeah, I think we are good to go, right? I can click on this first layer here. I hold shift, click on this layer here, which selects everything. I now hold Control A, and that's, I'm on the move tool, right? And I click here just to make everything centralized to the center, right? And I do Control D, right? So I have something like this. So this is our first design. So how do we save this design, right? So we go to file. So we are done with this design, and let's just save the design, right? And export, which can be used on our phones and so on, right? So we can even post on Instagram. So we go to file, right? We go to save. That's the first thing. Let's save this Photoshop document first before exporting. So I want to save this on my, so you just choose any location you want to save it to. So I'll decide to save mine here, design, and let's just say, let me just save on the desktop, right? And I'll take save, right? Okay, so I've saved this design, but I've not exported it. I've saved it as a Photoshop document, right? Which I can come back and edit anytime. But now I want to export this as an image. So how do I do this? If you're using an older version of Photoshop, right, you click on File and come to Save As, right? Click on Save As, and you have something which shows up like this. You have this window which appears like this, and you click on Save As type, click here, and you can now select JPEG like this. Click on this, and you select the location, and you can now take save like that, right? And you can play with the quality of the design, and you take OK. So it saves that for you, showing down here, and it has saved that for you, right? You can go to your desktop and you see the design there. So let me just go to my desktop quickly, desktop, and you can see this is a design, right? Now if you're using something like Photoshop 2020 or Photoshop 2021, how do you export this? Now if you come to file and click on save as, and you click on these options, you have very limited options here, right? So how do you save as? So actually you have to export, right? So you go to file and go to export here. So once you export this, export as, right here, and once you export this as a JPEG file, right? So the format here, we select JPEG like so, and we click on export, right? Then we can select wherever we want to export this file, right? And we take that, right? So I think that's it for this video, right? So this is the design we're able to do, right? And that's what we have. All right, see you guys in the next video.